You've probably heard a lot of numbers today, but I'm going to throw sort of one more at you, which is that transport accounts for a fifth of global emissions. And these are embedded in pretty much every aspect of our lives. Like even if you don't travel, the food you eat, the medicines you take, the clothes you wear, everything you consume pretty much comes with carbon attached to it because of the journeys it's made. And this is only going to increase in the coming years as the world's population grows and the middle classes expand. So making transport sustainable is going to be a huge challenge. But we're joined today by 4 companies who are meeting this head on. Merva Iqbal is the co-founder and CEO of Hived, a London-based startup that is redesigning parcel delivery by making it innovative, people-centric and environmentally sustainable. We have Tom O'Leary. He's the co-founder and CEO of JetZero, which, working with the US Air Force and NASA, is redesigning the shape of aircraft to increase their fuel efficiency. We have Igor Murakami. He's the director of Jaguar Land Rover's Open Innovation Program, which is looking to accelerate next-generation technology and sustainability, working with startups and companies on, amongst other things, electrification, manufacturing, and their supply chain. And Katja Constant is the Chief Investment Officer of Zero Avia, which is developing the world's most viable hydrogen powertrain for zero-emission aviation. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here at Wide Impact today.
Thank you.
Let's get into it. I mean, these are all very different ways of tackling what is a huge problem. Can I just ask each of you in turn, like, what made you choose your strategy for meeting kind of the question of sustainable innovation?
Yeah, I think when you look at parcel delivery, and in the UK specifically, there's around 10 to 12 billion parcels delivered annually, and 99.9% of them are still delivered in the diesel combustion way. And e-commerce is exploding. People are not going to stop shopping online all of a sudden. So if you look at getting to net zero, we have to build systems and new processes on how to move these goods away in a sustainable way that consumers can still shop online, but we're doing it in the best way possible that we can do. So we started to build it from the ground up, and that means entire network. So from how do you build a nationwide network of electric trucks to also the final mile, because a lot of these deliveries are happening to residential homes, air pollution, etc. is a huge problem. So yeah, looking at a huge problem, a growing industry, and figuring out how it can, be more sustainable.
Aviation is remarkably still a growing industry as well. Tom, tell me a bit about your business.
Sure. So JetZero is a pretty simple concept, which is to change the shape of the airframe, and one that will produce a dramatic improvement in efficiency, lowering fuel burn and emissions. And the reason why that appealed to me was that I had learned, I was working on, I'd been with Tesla, then I was working on an electric aircraft startup, and I hired a designer, an aerodynamicist who designed this electric aircraft, and learned that he had designed a blended wing, and that NASA had been working on blended wing technology for about 30 years, and they'd spent over $1 billion. And just because of sort of the entrenched dynamics of a global market that's ruled by a duopoly that just didn't really have any interest in disrupting themselves or their technology, this technology just had never gone to use. So what we found is that just by application of today's systems, a 50% reduction in fuel burn and emissions can be achieved in jet travel just using the exact same engines prior to transitioning to future propulsion.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Igor, tell us a bit about the Jaguar Open Innovation Program.
So the Jaguar Open Innovation Program was started around 2 years ago, and when I arrived in the company. And the whole idea is to accelerate the transitioning that we're doing in the business. So we are moving from a traditional OEM to a house of brands powered by sustainability, of course. And the open innovation comes as an opportunity to work with the ecosystem and find startups to help us accelerate delivering the strategy that we have, but also bringing new opportunities, new investments, new business models for a very traditional company, in fact. So the ecosystem is super big, and we need to tackle all the investments that we have there to support the business.
And Katja, I think a lot of people will have heard of and been quite excited about hydrogen. So tell me about what Zero Avia is doing.
Yeah, sure. So just maybe to frame it first, so we exist very much because we want to reduce the full climate impact from aviation and over time eliminate it. The reason I highlight that as well, CO2 emission is where a lot of the focus is. There are other harmful emissions from any combustion system, and we really looked at the full scope when we looked at different options to solve that. So we made 3 choices early on. One is to focus on hydrogen electric as the kind of decarbonization vector, because we think it's, from a first principle standpoint, actually the best and most efficient system. But then hydrogen has the highest potential to be a low carbon and zero carbon fuel. The second decision we made was to focus on propulsion. So we're an engine company. We're not building a new plane. We are working with airframe manufacturers to initially repower planes almost as they are today, but over time to work together with them to design aircraft that are optimized around our propulsion system. And the final choice we made was initially to focus on small aircraft, because while they are not the biggest contributor to emissions today, we believe in deployment-based innovation, so bringing something to market as soon as possible, increasing confidence in the technology, giving operators a chance to actually fly these aircraft as soon as 3 years out from now, 2 to 3 years out, and then over time scale that to larger aircraft.
Okay, great. And Tom, Katja, starting with aviation, can I ask you about sustainable aviation fuels? Like, I mean, you probably say hydrogen is your fuel of choice, but what place do you think these have kind of in an ecosystem that's looking to get to net zero? So these are things like biofuels or synthetic fuels that are made to kind of replace traditional fossil fuel-based means of powering aviation. Tom?
We tend to think of hydrogen as a sustainable aviation fuel. I mean, as far as biofuels go, there's a lot of sort of mental or market inertia in that direction. If we're taking a longer term view, I think the question is really, does it pencil? You know, do these things make economic sense? Do they actually get us to zero? You know, I think they're a useful bridge, but ultimately the first principles physics, I think, points more towards, you know, starting with efficiency and moving into propulsion like hydrogen that can actually get us to zero carbon emissions travel, and that's actually using technologies that have been proven out for decades, you know, many decades. It's not new.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's part of the transition. Unfortunately, our technology is not yet available today for larger aircraft, and we want the industry to move in the right direction in the meantime, but we see it very much as an interim solution, and I personally think it's really important to look at the full system cost of all these new fuels. So I think a lot of the time there's this conception that they're drop-in and everything's the same and it's very easy, and for a lot of these fuels, they're not purely drop-in. You actually do have to modify the propulsion technology somewhat, but also there is significant capex cost in the system to produce these fuels. They're just not incurred by sort of the airframer or the engine manufacturer. You have to build a capex plant elsewhere, and the airline will be paying for that because those fuels are much more expensive. So I think if you look at a full system complexity and cost basis, those fuels don't actually come out much more favorably, if at all, when you compare it to alternative propulsion systems.
Mm-hmm. And do you think there is a route to making hydrogen viable as a fuel for larger aircraft in time, or is that something that's kind of out of scope, you think, for the fuel?
So our solution, so we have it's hydrogen plus electric, so it's worth looking at each of those components together. So I guess one challenge we have is how do we bring enough hydrogen on board? And so there really we're working on different hydrogen storage solutions. So we need to move to bringing it on board in liquid form. And so there we need innovation in tank design and just kind of hydrogen handling to allow us to do that. We think it can, but that's not available today. So that's kind of one R&D pathway for us. And the second is the fuel cell technology, which converts the hydrogen back to electricity on board the aircraft. And there we're really looking at the power density of that technology. And it needs to improve by a factor of about 2.5 from where it is today. So we're not talking about 10x or 100x. It is something that's within reach, but it's going to take a bit of time to get there. So we're working on both those vectors at the same time.
I mean, particularly in reach, if you've got technology that's also going to bring fuel burn down potentially as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll start with 50% lower fuel burn with existing jet engines. Existing jet engines with modifications can burn hydrogen, and that's one way. Fuel cells are another way. I think both will come into use because that's true zero carbon emissions travel. Probably combustion on much longer ranges and fuel cell electric on shorter ranges, like 1,000 nautical miles, you know, but sort of transcontinental. Think of it as like transcontinental or international flights, probably hydrogen combustion. And that's, that looks like a technology development for the 2030s, but having a blended wing body jet frame that we're developing is going to enable that at long range.
Bringing us kind of back down to sort of what's going on Earth, Merva, how do we get people to kind of opt to choose kind of greener solutions? Like, what's the way into sort of getting people to use Hived, for example?
I think the approach at Hived has always been just build a superior product and quality experience first and default that it has to be electric. So you're not compensating by using a greener delivery or anything like that. You're actually getting a 10x better delivery experience. And I think once you can get the big retailers and enterprises on board, which we've managed to do, and educate them about, we're building a better quality delivery experience and product at the same time as being electric, then that can push consumers. Changing consumers' behavior is quite difficult. So they're not going to accept a green delivery, but it's worse quality or something like that. So you have to build that quality and also make it a lot more convenient. We're looking at loads of ways how to reduce that, consolidate deliveries, whether we do more pickup points, drop-off points, like looking at ways that we can actually make it more efficient for the end consumer as well.
Igor, I know the Open Innovation Programme has looked at kind of supply chains as well, because there's a whole world of kind of what happens before the user gets involved. Like, how is Jaguar Land Rover kind of working on that to kind of bring down the overall emissions of creating vehicles?
Well, we cannot do this alone, right? We need to work with the suppliers, of course, and we have targets for them, also for emission. But we need to explain to them the targets that we have, but also where we want to go, and then we can align on how we can produce innovation together. So at JLR, we have activities that involve suppliers, us, and the open innovation ecosystem with startups to help find these technologies to bring the targets that we want. So it's a play of the ecosystem, and everything comes to the technology that we can deliver for the customer experience, as she was mentioning before, because there's a whole, there's a whole big piece that needs to move before this goes to the customer. The customer will see the experience in the end, but we need to act with the ecosystem for every part of the supply chain at the end of the day.
And Tom and Katja, how do you think we get to a point of widespread adoption of the technologies that you're working on? Like, how does this become something that we see kind of as commonplace, do you think?
I guess I alluded a little bit to our approach to that, which is start small and build up. So we could just straight away start working on the really large aircraft flying long haul, but we think for especially what we're trying to do, it's really important to bring something to market sooner, because we're not just talking about a new propulsion technology, we're also talking about a new fuel type that will require a whole new supply chain around that, a new charging infrastructure, and the sooner we start catalyzing that, the better. So in our case, we're planning to bring a product for 20-seat aircraft to market in 25, which is very soon. Now that's not all of us will have flown on an aircraft of that size, but hopefully that will at least start to roll out in segments that are relevant, and it might actually end up changing slightly the fleet mix that we see today as we make those aircraft greener, quieter, and easier to operate. And then over time, we're going to continue working in the background and scaling that up to larger and larger aircraft. So that's our plan. So it will take a decade before we get into aircraft of a meaningful size, but we think that's just how the journey goes, and we think that's the best way to de-risk that pathway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ours is a similar approach, but just from a different angle, right? So if a startup were to come to market and say, we're going to build a blended wing body hydrogen aircraft that's going to fly super long range with tons of passengers, and we're going to go to market with that, that would be probably too many things stacked up, right? So working on hydrogen, working on airframes. These are just sort of segmenting it out and making it more achievable. So we're using existing engines, but we look forward to the day when we can use hydrogen propulsion technology.
And to all of you, do you think the market is going to take us to where we need to be, or would you like to see, or do you think it would be helpful to kind of have nudges from governments, authorities as well, to kind of push us towards the adoption of the things that you're working on?
Yeah, I think it'll always be helpful, but I don't think we can wait for that. I think, just truthfully, you just can't. It's a bit frustrating sometimes in the UK, but so, we take this approach of, the startup way is just get it out quick, get ship out quick and just get it done. And I think, if government and policy can support that, I think the ULEZ was a bit of a disappointment and delaying the ULEZ targets and things like that. But yeah, from us, we've got the energy, we've got the smart people in the team, etc., to actually build what we need to build.
Yeah, well, I thought Daria's presentation was the most interesting from this afternoon, just in highlighting how there's a lot of buzz around climate tech investment and so forth, and just the way she put it in perspective. So, I think, markets move more efficiently typically than the government. I mean, I say that having received a very large grant from the U.S. Air Force. But, I think in general, aerospace is a little bit different, right? Because the startup costs are massive. But I would love it if governments globally had an eye toward that and had a way to sort of incentivize capital to flow into climate. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'd say our core model is based on the assumption that we don't get the right government support at the right time because, as you say, we can't wait for that, but it can accelerate certain things and make economics slightly more favorable. But I think when we think about our customers, who are the airlines, and the speed at which they adopt our technology and what their economics are going to look like, our base assumption has been no carbon tax, no other kind of incentives, especially because our industry is very long-term, and you need to know that an incentive will be in place for a long period of time, and I think stability of policy is also something that unfortunately doesn't happen enough. So, yeah.
I think for the OEMs, it's key because if we think about the customer, or at least us charging everywhere, there's a big investment on infrastructure that needs to happen. It's charging points that the customer will have to stop and charge the vehicles. And today, I think the market is very fragmented, so needed support of the government, of course, and other players to consolidate everything. It's a big investment to make sure that we have enough energy, we have specific charging points on strategic places to avoid congestion or whatever comes from it. So it's really needed, in fact.
Mm. Do any of you have sort of partnerships or work kind of in this space, whether it's working on kind of battery tech or like hydrogen generation or anything like that kind of feeds into your businesses at all?
Yeah, we're always looking to collaborate in the ecosystem because we know we can't do everything ourselves. We know that there's a lot of pollution with air tires, so we've just sort of launched a partnership with a trial with Enzo tires, who are going to capture the particles from the air pollution from the tires. And we're always looking at what we can do with the batteries in our vehicles, and we believe that this is an ecosystem that needs to develop together and quickly. So we're open to trial and test and work collaboratively with a lot of partners in the industry.
We're sort of the partner that the aerospace industry is looking at to meet their sustainability goals. They're not really sure what to do. There's this sort of, a lot of innovation in aviation, but not much speaking to the core, which is a massively polluting, carbon generating, and so the supply base really looks at participation in what we're doing as a way to have an impact.
As you mentioned before on the open innovation activity, we have what we call the innovation territories, and one of them is specific batteries, and the other one is energy. So we are doing POCs with a lot of startups to understand different technologies, but also we have an investment fund, and we are also investing on new technologies related to battery or recycling, energy consumption, data, to understand better the market. So there's a lot of activity there, in fact.
Yeah, we think partnerships are absolutely critical. There's no way we can do everything alone. So we have partnerships from airports, for example, who are going to be key for all the charging infrastructure side of things, to companies like Shell that we're working with together on the refueling infrastructure and some of the regulatory standards around that, to some of our key suppliers that are critical to us unlocking that R&D pathway that I talked about, and then also airframe partners who we'll be working with to actually put our engine into their aircraft. So we have partnerships with Textron and Airbus and a few other players on that front. And then our customers, we also think of them as partners ultimately, so I mean they're customers first and foremost, but we do have a long-term roadmap for what we want to do with them over time. So.
That actually brings me on to something else I want to ask about. Like, obviously, we're trying to move away from fossil fuels, but do you think, the fossil fuel industry, do they have a role to play kind of in this transition, and would you work with them? I think the answer maybe is yes. If Shell are helping.
Yeah, I think they absolutely can, but I think you have to be careful about understanding their incentives and sort of what's really driving them. again, the stability of some of their commitments has not always been there. So some of them, the one day they are doing green hydrogen, next day they're not. So I think it's important to watch out for that. And if you are going to partner with someone like that, just understand that you might be exposed to that kind of risk. And yeah, I think they have definitely capabilities to bring that are relevant, certainly for green hydrogen production, distribution, et cetera. But I think it's just recognizing who's credible versus who might be doing it for more kind of greenwashing or, IRA sort of advantage reasons. So yeah.
Cool. And can I just ask one question to everyone? If there's one kind of governmental change that could be made overnight tonight that you think would kind of help move us forward in kind of getting transport down to being a net zero kind of industry, what do you think that would be?
I don't think it's exact policy, but to echo what Igor said before, I think when we're working in the electric vehicle space, the charging infrastructure it needs some serious work. And for people to actually adopt electric vehicles with confidence that they can actually use them and not have the charging headache in the mind, I think that will make a huge step.
Yeah, I think some form of incentives, perhaps tax incentives on capital, as I was saying before.
Again, I think incentives are always good, but I think the key problem today is the infrastructure, in fact.
I completely agree with all these, but would also add for us, I think what's top of mind is more global coordination on the certification timeline, because our technology is regulated, so we can't sell a product until it's certified. And at the moment, there's a lot of activity, but it's quite piecemeal, and there's a lot of work for us to do to link all that together. So more cooperation there would be great. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well,
Agree with that.
thank you so much, Merve, Tom, Igor, and Katja. I feel like we've, to be honest, barely scratched the surface of what is a fascinating and huge and very important topic, but really appreciate you being here, and this has been really, really interesting, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.